Hi, everyone. I just want to welcome you to another episode of Her Time. And this time, what we have is our fifth friend episode. And I know we've done a couple of these already. So we welcome you back. Those have been really special moments for us, as we expect that today is going to be a special one as well, as we welcome our fifth friend today. I'm going to introduce her in a minute, but let me get some other things out of the way first. And the first one is just a reminder that our email is hertime4talk@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Facebook has also our Spanish version, which is Tiempo de Ella. You can search us that way as well. So again, welcome. I'm gonna introduce myself first. My name is Daisy, and have my friends introduce themselves, and I'll be back to tell you who our fifth friend is, because I know you're watching her on the screen right now. Ladies, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jeanette.
I'm Regina.
I'm Rosie.
And then our fifth friend, who's dressed beautifully in this amethyst looking color, that's, I'm a little biased, and I'll tell you why. That's my daughter. Her name is Ariana Rivera, and she's our fifth friend today. We are talking about breaking away. And so Ariana is going to share her testimony, share parts of her story that I'm sure will resonate with you, and maybe some questions, or, if you happen to be in a place of decision, hopefully this conversation is helpful for you. So Ariana, let's start with an introduction. Who are you?
Well, I am blessed to be your daughter. I am a wife to my husband, Aaron, who is my bestie, who I've known since I was a kid. I'm a big sister, and recently I became a titi to the cutest little nephew in the whole world. I am a daughter of God and a daughter of the church, and you'll hear about that and about how that community raised me today too.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing in terms of your work? What are the projects ahead of you here?
I'm a nonprofit professional. I'm a program manager at a Christian humanitarian aid organization, the largest in the world. So I host events, and I do a lot of DEI work, and I manage all things pastor experience. Our organization partners with churches and pastors all over the United States to lift communities out of poverty all over the world. And I do a lot of that direct work with churches and pastors. And then outside of that world, on my time, I'm one of the founders of a ministry called Latinas Loving Jesus that is mostly based on mine, that has started in the last couple of years. So I've got amigas all over the world who follow me along on that ministry.
Yeah, that's exciting. I've been part of the Latinas Loving Jesus, and it's such an amazing community. It's just a blessing to be connected there. So I'm sure for you, it's just God's way of holding you, and hugging you every week. So the next question I'd like to ask you is connected to the title of this episode. The title of this episode is Breaking Away. And if you don't know it, because we haven't said it yet, Ariana does not live where her parents live and where her sister and husband and all of that live. So Ariana and her husband live outside of the state of Illinois, the city of Chicago. So Ariana, can you tell us a little bit to start us off on just the whole, the experience, or the initial stuff that happens when someone decides to break away?
Yes. So for me, it's a very literal breaking away. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, which is a little over 500 miles away south of Chicago, where my family is, and where I grew up. It's where my in-laws are, where my husband grew up as well, where the church is that raised the both of us for the majority of our lives. And I will say, It is so hard thinking now. It's now been almost 3.5 years since we actually left, and it still shocks me every single day that I was able to make the decision to leave, to break away truly from everything that I had ever known, from being close to family, from being in a city that is familiar. I also went to college in Chicago, so I just have spent my whole life there, in the community where my church was. So leaving was leaving so many things. But I think when we talk about breaking away, essentially what so many of those decisions of leaving something behind boil down to is leaving a version of yourself. And it's hard. It's hard to leave a place where you know you so well. And I think one of the deepest fears is, who am I going to be outside of this place and space? So around, I want to say 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I started to experience some discomfort in spaces that I spent a lot of time in church, in career. I really did feel this disturbance. And as you can see, I am a very proud plant mom, and take that part of my life very, very seriously. This is one of 30 something plants in my apartment. I know you make that face, Regina. Yes, it's a lot of plants, and it's a collection that grew very fast. But it's something that I love, and I know that so many other gardeners and plant people feel the same way. I feel like I learned so much about myself and so much spiritually as I nurture plants and as I nurture things to grow, and care for them the way that God nurtures us. And I started to feel discomfort that I would relate to what happens to a plant that is in a flower pot that is too small, that it has outgrown. This, when I bought it, was about 6 leaves when I got it a year and a half ago. And it was in a smaller pot when I brought it home from the store, and it thrived in that pot for a while. But plants experience something called being root bound. And if they stay in a space too tight, their roots start to grow in a circle, which essentially then chokes the root of the plant. And then you start to see signs of disturbance, changing color of leaves, dropping leaves, droopy leaves, burnt ends on the tips of leaves. And a few years ago, I started to experience discomfort, and there were signs of it for a while for me. I was frustrated with a lot of things, frustrated about progressing in leadership in some spaces where I was wanting to move forward in career and just not seeing the open doors. It's so hard breaking away from one career, which I did, and moving into a new one, and then not seeing growth at the same rate that you want. So I experienced a lot of discomfort and frustration. And with supportive loved ones and people who knew me really well, I think there were people in my life, including my parents, who knew that it was in me. There was this desire in me to outgrow where I was, and to encourage me to seek out what it would need to move on and to break away from the situation that I was in. And in me growing up, there was always a desire to move. There was always a kind of love of everything that was on the outside, this excitement and this joy in traveling and taking road trips and learning about new people and new places. That's always been in me. But adulthood has a way of discipling hope right out of you. And I grew up as a teenager thinking I would move away when it was time for college to come, and kind of never turned back. I wanted to be a designer. I wanted to move to New York. That was always my dream. And then coming out of college to find a job, you just realize how much harder all of those things are than you think they are. And then you find ways to justify not following those dreams, and you get comfortable. And here's what I will say, is that I think the word comfort is so vilified because the world and society is so obsessed with dreaming big and with leaving things behind and calling where we are too small for us. I think I outgrew the version of myself more so than I did the places where I was. And then when it finally kind of came time and things came to a head for me, I was not going to be happy without making a big change. It took a lot of prayer, a lot of crying, and a lot of tears, and a scouting trip. My husband and I came down to Nashville, and we're looking at apartments, and the very first apartment we saw was so horrible. It was not what was sold online. It was so terrible. We had made up a code word of when we looked around of when we were like done, and I could not have shouted that code word fast enough when we walked into the and afterward I had this big crying attack. It was just like, if this is what's here for me, I'm just gonna stay home. At least my family is there. I like, why would we leave? And my husband was like, okay, sure, yeah, if we stay, we can have a good life. But I wonder if we're always gonna want to know how much bigger God would have gotten outside of our comfort zone. And it really disarmed me and challenged me in the moment. And that was when I made up in my heart and in my mind that I had to move on. I had to see how much bigger God was, because I really do think up until that point, God had grown to the size of my church, and instead of being all encompassing and overwhelming, it's something that I could believe in that didn't have boundary or limit. And yeah, so we decided to make the move a few years ago. And it was hard, and it's still hard to be away from everything you know and everything that you love. But with this plant as an example, that is what I feel that I have experienced ever since creating more space and more distance from the places that made me comfortable. I'd say for anyone who's thinking about breaking away or anything that has resonated with you already, I think there are two main reasons that we have these conversations of breaking away. One is we experience deep discomfort, and one is that we find that we're too comfortable. And either way, growth is what God has on the horizon for us when we're willing to take a risk on him and to follow him into new territory. There's, of course, more, that I could say, Mom, and you could direct me. I could talk about how God had built a bridge with a new job that was very clear as day to move forward, or about the hardship kind of that met us after we got here.
Well, and we do want to hear that. So I'd like to hear that, but there's something that you said that, made me kind of go back and think. When I was in college, I remember I was always dreaming about not living here, not living where my parents lived, not living where my comfort and familiarity was. So I was born on the East Coast. So, I came here as a kindergartner. But here's what happened to me. I had all of these dreams. I'm going to finish college. I'm going to go to New York specifically. And then my mom started crying. My dad, when I started to share all of these things, no, my dad, traditional, right? The girl leaves when she gets married, that kind of stuff. So anyway, this is why I'm saying that. It's because that kept me here. And so with you, just even looking at now, you've got a plan with Aaron, you're going to go ahead and take this step. How much of an impact was it to look at the people who would stay? Because that's hard.
Yes, that's a great question. Of all the things, I think, right, I think all of our life experience happen at the intersection of a lot of different things. And what I mean by that is I'm a woman of color, I'm Latina, I'm a daughter, I'm a first daughter in my family. All of those things carry different vantage points. And I remember having a conversation with someone where I was like, no, where I wanted to leave. And that's what we were talking about before we had made the decision. And it was like, but I'm the one, I'm the oldest. What about my sister? She looks to me. She measures decisions that she makes against decisions that I make. When my parents need something, I'm there. When my mom needs something, my mom is my greatest confidant and friend. She's going to be 500 miles away from me, but also she needs me in a way. And I think one of the hardest things for me was I had done women's ministry for 10 years. And I hated the thought of leaving them behind. They're so much a part of who I am. My own value system, my integrity has been shaped by women who will never be named publicly, who will never get praise or followers online. But their faithfulness has shaped me and who I am. And I felt like an abandoner for a long time. That was so hard for me to think about leaving them behind. But I also think that when you're in a space that is loving, you're in a space that grows you, what better thing and way for you to honor them than to show off what they were able to do in you in front of others and in other places and other people. And I think so much we mistake when we're thinking about making a big move. We mistake our loyalty. We think loyalty when really we're just afraid. And we can so pass off blame on people for why we stay somewhere, when really God is on a personal journey with me and everyone else is along for the ride. And I can honor them by following God, not staying behind for them.
That's good. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to open up the floor because, I could keep asking, but Jeanette, go ahead.
Me. Okay, so actually, Daisy, when you were asking the question, I thought, oh, is she gonna ask what I'm thinking? But it is a little bit different. So I too broke away. I lived in Chicago. I was born and raised there, and I felt from the Lord, and my husband felt from the Lord to leave Chicago, and we are now in Georgia, right? And while we knew in our hearts that we knew that it was the right decision, I cried my eyeballs out when they were praying us out of the church, and not praying us out. That sounds bad, like get out of here. But they were praying for us, and people were like asking me like, "Are you sure that's the right thing?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm totally sure," but I was crying, And then, and when I came here, like even though I knew it was the right thing, but like I would say the first 4 to 5 months, I thought, oh my gosh, maybe I didn't hear right. Maybe it wasn't the right choice. And so my question for you is, like, I know you had the bad apartment experience thing. That was before you moved, but after you moved and after you made that decision, like, was there ever a time that you doubted, did Aaron and I hear this correctly? Are we in the right place?
Yes. I don't know that we came to the point of asking the question if we had made the wrong choice, but I did have the like, oh my God, did I really make this permanent of a decision? I did have that moment, and it lasted for a long time. So for us, we moved November of 2019. And a week later, I started my new job, which was traveling weekly to churches all over the country. And in those first couple of months, I was training. So from November through February, I wasn't home for longer than a period of 4 days. I was everywhere. So I got to a point of like exhaust. I was in tears all the time because I was traveling and I had left home. So I felt like I didn't have a home because I wasn't anywhere for long enough to feel like I was. So I had that kind of like tired and exhaustion. But then February, I was supposed to get a 3-week break of travel, which was so exciting, which was supposed to last through the end of March. Well, we know in March of 2020 and the beginning of what turned into a massive pandemic that interrupted everyone's lives for almost a couple of years, then that happened. And I find myself 500 and something miles away from everything I've ever known during the most unsure time of my own life and in history. And I'm away from all of those things. Those first couple of months of the pandemic were so hard on my mind because I was in unfamiliar territory in every category of my life. No one could have expected what it would have meant for us. But at the same time, we moved here, which is a music city, so that Aaron, my husband, who's a full-time musician, for work connections, there was no music, there are no concerts, there are no tours, right? There are none of those things. So we're just like home alone together, which is awesome because we adore each other. But at the same time, it's financially hurt in a lot of ways. So I remember in those couple of months, like, Lord, did you bring me out here to die? What am I doing? What in God's name? You knew the timing and I didn't. Why would you do this now? Is what I felt for the first couple of months. But I want to say like 3-4 months into the pandemic itself, it was like, okay, Lord, I could see that I've got growing to do and that you've got things you want to say to me. And you put me in a private space to have me alone. And I remember spending a lot of time, and Mom, you probably remember this, I became obsessed with plants. And I remember so being in this space of like, okay, God, in this time, because I can't go out, you want me to go deep. And it became a really deep time of spiritual reflection and learning and unearthing a lot of things that I would not have if I was busy the way that I was when I was back home in Chicago, doing everything, connected to everyone, on demand in so many ways. And here, you know, it was just me. And whatever the Lord had to say, you know, I had the ear to hear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
I know that for me, when we moved to Texas, that was a really hard moment. And breaking away from the familiarity, from your family, your friends, your loved ones, right, was a big struggle, because here we are moving 1,300 miles away from everyone. And I'm saying we're going deep down south to Texas, right? And where I don't know anyone aside from my husband's family who lives in San Antonio. But even that, we were like 2.5 hours away from them. So here we are in unfamiliar territory, away. And one of the things that you had said that really resonated was growth. It was definitely a time of growth for me, because like you know, I was so active, so involved with the worship team, involved with the women's retreat, involved, you know, with my household, really involved in ministry, that it got to the point where I neglected, I could say that, my marriage, and my marriage was hurting. So God's perfect timing, he came right on time, and he pulled us away from everything to restore and rebuild the marriage, right? So my question to you is, what was your greatest struggle in breaking away from all of this?
Yeah, I think there are two that are equal. I'll go one place first and one that then inspires something else that I want to be sure to say too. I dealt with a lot of guilt leaving. It's like you said, Mom, about the people, you know, that you leave behind. I struggled with a lot of guilt, and I felt like everything that anyone in my family experienced while I was away, I felt guilty for leaving them to deal with it without me. That has been my deepest pain throughout the time. That's not just like early, that has been throughout. It's always dealing with, oh my gosh, I'm so far away when the people I love are hurting. That's a pain point. But I think too is loneliness. I think that's the pandemic. That's also leaving everyone who you know behind. My two best friends are in Chicago. My sister, who is my greatest friend, is in Chicago. So there's also a deep loneliness that I experienced. But God provides, and God is really cool in the way that he makes connections for us. Because during the pandemic, it's horrible in so many ways for us, and we'll be figuring out for years the effects that it's had on us, and what that isolation has done. It forced me to find a creative outlet for ministry, for spiritual reflection, which for me happened online. It happened on Instagram. I really had a lot of time to dedicate to that, my corner of the internet. And I found friends in that time. I think something that 2020 did, that I will thank God forever that it did do, was it made it not weird to invite someone who you didn't know, but you followed on Instagram to Zoom. It did that. You know, who in 2019 is messaging you on Instagram, let's have a cafe via Zoom? I don't want to, I don't know you, you know, like you follow me, but beyond that, what is it? But because 2020 pivoted so much to happening online, down to family dinners and Easter on Zoom, a couple of women reached out to me who we've followed each other for a long time. So you kind of feel like you know them a little bit. And we're like, one, she sent me a Starbucks gift card and she was like, cafe on me, but let's do it on Zoom. Let's meet. With another woman, and just three, Latinas who are all preachers and ministers of the gospel. We had a Zoom. It lasted for hours. We cried together and we were like, did this really happen? Like, one is in New York, I'm in Tennessee, the other is in Southern California. And we're just kind of chatting away. And that has been the greatest gift. In isolation, I had to reach out somewhere. And God provided relationship. And those two women are my co-founders of Latinas Loving Jesus. So our little Zoom cafe, which we do every few weeks now, has turned into like ride or die relationships, best friends who I've now met in person and spent time with in a couple of different places in the country. So as much as loneliness is horrible, I think one of the things it does for those of us who like to be left alone, I like privacy and I like to be left alone. But a depth of loneliness that I experienced in 2020 forced me to say that I needed someone. It forced me to say that I needed relationship. And God provided in an unbelievable way that continues to grow my own circle. I'll never be lonely again. I have amigas everywhere now.
It also forced you to redefine it in a way, right? Yeah. Because friendship had to look a certain way and operate a certain way. And past 2020, that was not possible. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that even with the three of us, with her time, we've gotten closer since 2020 because we would have the Zoom meetings and we would meet together more often and talk more often. Yeah, definitely Zoom is a godsend, right? We didn't know it would happen this way, but
yeah, for sure. Look at what it's done with the four of you having created a couch moment, to bring women into conversation between friends. That doesn't happen without the normalizing of a space like this. The same thing with Latinas Loving Jesus, the same thing with my own friend group. But one thing I will say to the women listening is this is awesome. This is great. This is a resource. This is connecting you all over the place. But I know because I have been present, these four women have all hugged and cried on couches together in person, and that this relationship is so much more than just this. Just like my two amigas who I met for Zoom for the first time, put in the work as much as it's possible to get in the physical space of the people who you call your loved ones. Do it. There's something about that kind of bonding. This is a jumping off point. It's a spark plug for relationship. Yes, it's going to connect you, but there is nothing like the gathering of women, like my mom has always said. And especially in times of transition in your life, a gathering of women is necessary for a woman.
Yes, that's good.
I know that we're probably getting close to wrapping up. I just have one question. And I remember when you were little and you were in high school and you were looking through all of those magazines and you were like, gonna be a fashion designer, and you had this notebook, you were drawing like, your skirts and I remember, and I was like, man, this girl's gonna go someplace, and I, in my mind, I could totally see it with, fashion. But God, on the other hand, saw it in ministry. But in ministry, like, when you were leaving Chicago and you were coming to Nashville, and yeah, we know that the pandemic happened and everything, and God placed Latinas Loving Jesus, and now everything's all of your ministry is pretty fluid, where you could do it probably from wherever you wanted to, correct? What if God called you back to Chicago?
I like this question because I think it illustrates an interesting point. I've thought a lot, I haven't thought a lot about moving back to Chicago. I mean, I will say that my nephew has now called into question how long I want to be away because it's so hard, his juicy cheeks being 500 miles away from me. But I will say this, is that I think once you make a huge decision, it becomes a part of your own pride that you did it and that you were willing to do it and you were tough enough to do it. But then there comes this shame of, what if I go back? and like, Lord, don't make me do that. What does it say about me that I don't stay? Does it say something about my weakness? And I thought a lot about this. But one of my favorite books to study in the Bible, one of my favorite people is Nehemiah, who very literally God then calls back. Job with the king, notoriety, and all of that. And God is like, hey, but your people, bro. All of those relationships are going to pay off for the betterment of your people, and I'm going to bring you back to them. And I don't think that there's any shame in following the voice of God to be present with the people where God wants you. So I don't know what the Lord has in store for me as it pertains to geography. But what I will say is that it's a gift to be loved and to not burn all of the bridges when you leave a space, because so lovingly, the women's ministry I led in for the 10 years that I was home, I felt so much guilt leaving it behind. God has grown me in immense ways, and I have ministry in other ways now. But I was invited to speak back at the women's conference in my home church that raised me and that grew me up, and I'll be there in the next however many weeks until the conference. So I'll say that too, that like when it's time to leave, don't burn every bridge. One, it is not God honoring, it is not honoring to the people. Something that Aaron and I were so intentional about when we were making this decision was that we wanted to be loved on the way out. And I think when we wait around too long in spaces where God has tried to kick us out of, we burn everyone on the way out, because we make it out to be everyone else's fault that we didn't listen to God on time. And yes, some people are responsible for hurting you. They're responsible for moving you out of the places, for you saying this is so uncomfortable. That's true. It is. But ultimately, God is responsible for me. And he's not the one hurting me, but God allows us to experience discomfort to kick us in the butt to move on to the place where he actually is, and where he's waiting for us, and where he wants more for us. So I'm so glad that we were intentional about that, about loving people, about not gossip and slander on our way out of anything, because more than me, going back to speak, Aaron gets asked back all the time. They want all the time, every album, every recording, every gig that the worship team has. We're both really loved, and they honor us whenever we're there, and we get invited back in that way too. So there's no shame in going back to a place that God has for you, especially because if you're doing it right, you're growing wherever you are, and you're adding value when you go back.
Amen.
One of the things, Ariana, that I've heard you say in the past, just to kind of encapsulate the whole concept of breaking away, was I remember when you said, Mom, this isn't about running away from anything. This is about running to something. And how does it feel, right? You're running to something, but you're not exactly sure what that something is.
Yes. Yeah. I do. I say, and I stand by it, and I say it all the time. We so often break away from things. But no, it was so much more leaving a place to find a place that God hadn't given a name to. And even today, I'll say Nashville is not the reason I left. It wasn't because God had Nashville for me. It was because I had outgrown where I was, and God wanted more for me. And in my mind, I knew how big and how capable I was according to where I was. Once you don't have a place and there's no pinpoint on the GPS, there is no boundary for what God is capable of convincing you can be. And I think that is what I have experienced, is a huge faith journey. I say all the time that Aaron is not as anxious, doesn't overthink things the way that I do. He is my calm in every storm. So in leaving, it's like, hey, what is God gonna do? When is God gonna fix that? When is God gonna provide? And I tell my girlfriends all the time, I ride on the coattails of Aaron's faith everywhere that I go. And that's what I feel was this experience, is I held hard to his assuredness that God would provide and take care of us. So it's really hard to not to not know where you're supposed to stop,
Yeah.
to not know where you're supposed to land. But I thank God for having been raised in a context that leans so heavily on hearing the voice of God, because I feel that I developed that skill and that relationship with God young. And I trust that I can discern what God has to say to me. And it hasn't failed me in a very, very long time.
Yeah. That's
That's
good.
good.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Very good.
I wanna make sure that we spend a minute or two, because there's a physical move, obviously, that you made. With that, there are so many other elements to it, but can we speak a little bit into breaking away maybe from traditions, breaking away from emotional relationships, breaking away from same old kind of thing. And anyone can speak to that, but breaking away from more than just a geographical experience. Any thoughts?
I'll give a plant example, like I did
Okay.
to start. Of course, let's do it. At this point too. I bought a plant early in my plant mom journey. I ordered it from a specialty shop on Etsy. And I got it, and I had read and researched, and I had put it in a specific space for the right amount of light and all of that. And it started to lose its bottom leaves. They turned yellow, shriveled up, and fell off. And I panicked. What am I doing wrong? I read all of the research, the instructions. So I sent a message to the Etsy shop owner, the gardener, and he asked some questions. He was like, okay, so yellow leaves, they're falling, they're getting crunchy on the bottom of the plant. What's happening at the top of the plant? I was like, well, it kind of looks like there's a new leaf developing, at the top. And he's like, okay, you have to think that anytime you move a plant from where it was, it's experienced the trauma. And to save itself, it's going to drop the leaves at the bottom because they receive the least amount of light. But if it's still growing, the plant is thriving. And then, okay, cool. Like I said, I learned so much, in trying to nurture plants, about myself, about God, about life in general. And I think that there have been, you will learn about your relationships if you make a geographical move. There are going to be the people who call, there are going to be people who say they call, there are going to be people who say, I'm going to come visit you. And a lot of it isn't true. And it doesn't say anything about your personal value. What it does say is that there are things that you can live without. And just like that person can live without calling you, you can live without them calling. There have been those people who have not called. It's okay. Those relationships have faded. Have I experienced disappointment and sadness? Have I had to check myself and do I put too much of my own value in what people do and don't do in relation to me? I have had to check, but some leaves have fallen away of relationships that I don't miss and that were right for the time and for the place that I was. But the reality, even specifically on friendships, my plant thrives. I have community that I didn't have. The leaves are bigger than they've ever been. My life is fruitful in so many ways. There are also ways that I thought about myself that I know I thought that way because of where I was. And now I don't think that way anymore. I've operated in feeling guilty in so many ways. And what are people going to think? How are they going to feel? And really allowing myself to be identified by who people said that I was. But when you're out there all alone, it's on you to establish who you are and your identity and what people know you for. And I can't live in the world of everyone knows who I am because of who my parents are or where I come from. I have to establish myself in a way that is rooted, not in a place, but that is mobile and that I'm still me everywhere that I am. So it's so hard to lose things that were once dear, but you aren't starting over. It isn't brand new. You're building upon what God had already done in your life. And you can thrive anywhere with the right support and dealing healthily with losing what you're going to lose when you move on.
Amen. That's good.
Yeah,
Well,
like he says, in John 15, I prune the ones I love.
mhm.
So he takes things away so that we can be more fruitful for a
Mhm.
reason, you know. And that's why I
Mhm.
always think, like, if I lose friends or if friends start to like fade away, it's not anything that I did. It's just it needed to happen so that I could be more fruitful in another area, because you can't like spread yourself thin everywhere. You have to, know that God is going to prune the ones he loves. And when something's taken away, something else will come.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, that's good.
I'm sure we can all think about things, again, not necessarily specific to our geographic placement, but we can think of things where we've done the breaking away. We moved away from old, from same, from familiar, into different spaces, and different modes of thinking. And we've all had that experience. All of us on this call have had that experience. I want to move into the last thing, and that is, ladies, let's share some lessons. What are some things, given Ariana's story? And Ariana, you can also participate here, but what are some of the lessons, that we want to make sure the women listening, viewing her time, will walk away with? What are some of the lessons?
For me, I would say one of my favorite verses is "Be still." And so what I mean by that, as far as this, is that, you know how I said that in the first 4 months I was like, oh my gosh, I don't think I made the right decision and all that. Like, be still, don't freak out, don't make rash decisions based on emotions of the moment. Be still and trust God and wait on him. And things may not happen, at the timing that you thought they would happen. But if you are rooted deeply in him and you are trusting him and you love him and you know that God has you, then just be still and let God be God. Let God do what he's going to do in your life, and try not to like, okay, well, I'm going to break away again. I'm going to break away back, or I'm going to break, it's, it's, there's times where you just have to rest and be still and let God be God.
I'm going to piggyback off of that. And I'm going to say, a lot of the times we know that there has to be some breaking away. There has to be something, that there's more out there, or God has something that, like you're standing on like this open door and you're not sure if you have to walk through it or if you're going to, but I always think of it this way. Like, I know that God is speaking to me because it's just a small, consistent voice. Consistent voice. He's not, showing me big signs or, having prophecies preached over me or anything. It's just a small, consistent voice that he tells me, I need you to move away from this. I need you to let that go. I need you to step into this bigger place. And it's a small, consistent voice to where, it's just easy to move into that. It's not this big scary thing because it's just been so consistent and so comforting in that voice of his to move forward.
Mhm.
I love that you said that, because in Beth Moore said, when God becomes thematic, her ears perk up, right? So when God starts speaking to you and you're being sensitive to the voice of God, he starts speaking to you in different ways, right? Through people, through scripture, through the radio, and so that's how you know that God is speaking, right? And one of the lessons that I've learned in the process, because like Ariana said, the question was, would she move back home, right? Well, that happened to us. And we left for 7 years, came back, and I felt so, there were so many emotions that I was dealing with, right? And one of the lessons I had to learn was trust the process, because it was hard. It was hard, but that was my time to really hone in on what God wanted to do. And I knew that God wanted to take me to that next level. And I had to do away with a lot of things. I had to do away with friendships that I thought we were close and have dissipated. Still love them, right? But it taught me to just trust the process, trust God, and believe and know that He's with you and that He has ordered your steps. And yeah, that's what sustains me, and just taking my relationship with Him to that next level.
Amen. Ariana, any last lessons, observations, something you want to highlight as the last word to our listeners?
Yes, I'm going to finish with a plant analogy.
Okay.
Another thing that I have learned,
I love them.
the goal is always growth. The goal is always growth. One of the other things that I learned in the young stage of my plant motherhood, where you're just watering it and putting it in front of the window, hoping that works, is sometimes when you're not seeing leaves at the top of a plant and it's months and months, it's because the roots are going deeper. And I think, Jeanette, what you said about being still is so key, because it might not look right out of the gate that the decision that you made to leave something behind or to break away was right. It might not look right away. But things under the surface, when we're connected to the source of ourselves, God Himself, things under the surface are just as important as the growth that people can see. And deep are the key to healthy growth at the top. So your growth, while you might not see it and people might not notice it, and it might look for a long time like you made a horrible decision to break away, if you feel called by God, just wait it out, because God is doing something in you that you will one day be able to name, and that one day the rest of the world will be able to see.
Amen.
Amen.
That's good.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, lessons everywhere. So thank you so much. I am so grateful. I'm so proud of you, Mija. So proud of you. For trusting God. I think number one, it's even if, because you've got a dad who is very emotionally tied to his children, to his wife, to his family, to his church. And I know that those things are hard. However, even with all of that, even with how much love you received anyway, while you were sitting right here, with that, you trusted God more than your father. You trusted God more than your mother. You trusted God more than anyone else, any of the big voices speaking into your life. So I'm really proud of you. I'm proud of Aaron as well, but he's not here. So I'm proud of you for that. So I thank God every single day and throughout the day for you, for your obedience to what the Lord has been offering you and continues to offer you. So thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. I love you so much.
Thank you. I love you. I love you all. I miss you all.
I love you.
Love you.
Ladies, again, her time, number 4, talk@gmail.com. We will be posting this episode soon. Our 5th friend breaking away with our guest, Ariana Rivera. So ladies, love you, my friends. Take care. And Ariana, I'll see you soon. Love you, Mom.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye.